Welcome, everyone. My name is Janelle Robinson. I am the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee at Nanatech. Today, we are going to be welcoming Annawon here for our Native American Heritage Month celebration. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for helping coordinate this. And Annawon, I'm just going to pass it right to you so that you can have all the time that you need. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm pretty sure you can hear me, right? All right. Okwe, Skwe Kwasani Tompak, Natatsuis, Annawon Weeden, Nutamas, Mashpee Wampanoag, Ka Nano Haganiak, Ka Mashpee Pequot, Katapatanamu, Chiwami Mitonkosak. Kwe, hello, good morning. Woni Matompan. Want to greet you in the language of our folks. Thank you. We're Wampanoag people. Rhonda, I believe, further down the coast there with the Lumbee Nation and all. Both of us are pretty much first wave. As many of you know, Virginia was the first colony before Plymouth. So our Eastern nations primarily were interacting with Europeans longer than some of those who have recently been discovered, to be honest with you. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have any of the knowledge that I can share with you folks. If folks can just imagine how difficult it has been for an individual like myself to pretty much have to unlearn everything that I was taught in school. I can't speak for Rhonda. I can't speak for any other Indigenous person who might be working with you folks or you might come across in your lifetime, but I was pretty much denied my history throughout my entire life, particularly most of my school years. And it's obviously a very difficult, challenging time, I would say, for a lot of Indigenous people who you know, we just came through Columbus Day, which is now, fortunately, hopefully being changed into Indigenous Peoples Day. So if any of you folks realize that your community has not made that initiative already, I would highly recommend you do something like that, because again, some of us literally will be denied our own identity throughout our entire lives. For us to go from Indigenous Peoples Day, which, as you may know, is the beginning of October, right into Halloween. Halloween is a time where we find a lot of non-Indigenous cultures want to emulate ours during that time. Between Thanksgiving and some of the inappropriate activities that take place with between Halloween and some of the inappropriate dressing up and other things that take place at Halloween and Thanksgiving, it's really demoralizing. I don't know many other words to describe it, but when you're literally in school being denied your identity, being told you're not even the tribe you claim you are, that tribe no longer exists. There were obviously, as you know, many attempts to destroy our heritage, prevent us from speaking our language, obviously from dressing in those ways. And to see just a few generations later where all these other cultures from all around the world can play games and have fun at their leisure when it's convenient, when it's, hospitable. It's despicable when you realize, like, a person like myself, like we were encouraged to cut our hair. We were probably abused if we didn't cut our hair. And I'm not just talking about, your run-of-the-mill kind of torture that I think a lot of us might have went through when we were in our high school days and stuff. Some of our peers might not have been nice, but I'm talking some of these were the educators in my life, the teachers that I turned to for this kind of help and assistance and support. So I basically, that's just a long introduction to why I can't thank folks enough for creating this opportunity. I want to thank Rhonda and every individual who's taken time out of their day to hopefully open their mind and expose themselves to these things. Anything that I will be sharing, if it is uncomfortable, that's a good thing. Many of us who know that we do want to grow, sometimes that's a painful process, shedding that skin or, letting things go that will prevent you from growing. So, and then of course you have to find yourself in an uncomfortable space sometimes just to realize I've never been here and I don't want to be here. I wouldn't want my children to be here. So these are the kinds of things that hopefully today's program can help us towards. So I do want to backpedal a little bit. We were the tribe that did participate in the Thanksgiving event. So I figure today might be a good place to start there. But before we do, I do want to share a little of our oral history. Our oral history speaks to thousands of years of history being passed down orally, as I mentioned, to preserve things that were embedded in our lifeways. When you hear the story that many tribes tell of Sky Woman falling from the sky world, some of you might think we are extraterrestrials or we were put here by that life beyond this planet. You want to think in a spiritual realm, maybe you think we descend from the heavens. However, we do firmly believe that Sky Woman fell from the sky world, landed in a planet that we now occupy. However, it was entirely made up of water at that time, at which time she would have drowned herself had she not been saved by the giant sea turtle, who apparently appeared right beneath her and allowed her to rest on the back of his shell, which is why we still call this continent Turtle Island. Once she was on the shell and saved and catching her breath and her composure, it was then that she realized all the sea beings that had gathered around her, and she had asked each and every one of them to try and get to the bottom. She promised there would be dirt, soil, and if any of them could bring them even just a sample of that, she could bring many great living things to the land that she was now on, this Turtle Island. And it was all the sea beings that were trying, big, humongous whales, ferocious sharks, as I say, the fast and the furious. None of them could get down to that water, to that bottom of that water, to get this dirt. And of all the animals that were trying that day, it was the muskrat, little tiny, often overlooked, often considered insignificant contribution to all of our existence. If you never thought of a muskrat, hopefully after today, you can hold them in high regard. That little guy held his little lungs with as much air as he could. And he made it. He got all the way to the bottom, and he didn't just reach the bottom. He took his little tiny, wee little rat-sized muskrat paw, and that was all the dirt he had that he could get in his paw, and he could grab, and he could swim all the way back up to Mother Earth and give it to her. And from that, Sky Woman, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call that life giver, she gave life to everything that we have now to call not just this continent, but we call Wami Mitonkwasak. If you didn't understand much of my greetings, I think we all understand what Kwe means now. However, Katapatanumu Wachiwami Mitonkwasak. That is a saying that many of us say, can't say it enough. It's literally thank you, all my relations. So as I speak to you from a level. I'm not here to shame anyone. Again, our folks, the Wampanoag folks, we are the ones who welcomed the settlers when they first arrived. We had a lot of reasons not to. Squanto had been abducted at least twice that we know of, and he was from Patuxet, which is where present-day Plymouth is. My folks, my mom's tribe being out on the Cape, we were hit even harder. As you know, Cape Cod, arm of land sticking out in the ocean, it was hit hard by slavery, hundreds of years. Giovanni de Verrazano, for those of you who may not be familiar, he traveled through the Narragansett Bay in 1524. So if you do the math, that's just about 100 years before the Mayflower washed ashore. And as I mentioned, they washed ashore on Cape Cod. It was later that they moved to Plymouth. So again, first wave colonizers, also slavery. It wasn't just people like Squanto being exported twice, as I meant. I don't know how that gentleman could trust people the second time, let alone he trusted them a third time, because if you're doing the math, he was kidnapped twice, and then he was still there to greet them in their language when they showed up at Plymouth Rock with Samoset that day. So very trusting people. We obviously don't like when that's taken advantage of, but it's just something that, again, is embedded in our history. If you heard that story that I just shared about all our relations, I'm not just talking about our fellow human beings here. I'm not just talking, white skin versus dark skin. I'm talking all my relations, the wood, the trees, the rocks, all the four-legged, the winged. So if I can maybe just slide this, my head out of the way here. I was on a recent Zoom with our tribe is partnered with the Seattle-based Educator, who is obviously based out of Seattle, one of the best cities I've seen so far. I do like the Southwest. As soon as I get off the plane there, I can see the culture. This here is obviously a manhole cover. I don't know if you can see it. The history of their folks depicted. Raven, they believe the raven is the gatekeeper or creator who carried a lot of life and messages from the spirit world itself. You can see, whales, fish, ravens, things like that. If you look closely at this manhole cover, and this literally is, as you can see my foot there on the side, I was just driving through the city and something so prominent to me, subtle. It wasn't beating it down people's throat, but just made me so proud. Obviously, I had to. I'm on riding a bike here. I was on my mountain bike, just cruising the city, trying to see what I could while I had time there, and literally had to stop on my tracks. Had to take a picture, as you can see, and it was just so inspiring. All these stories that I'm sharing with you about literally how I was denied my history and how literally this entire country pretty much celebrates our tribe specifically, let alone our culture, this time of year. It's obviously prominent. It's good to see our culture prominent throughout the year. It's good to see things like this in urban areas, especially a place where you probably wouldn't think of indigenous culture, a place that's been heavily colonized. So I just wanted to give folks that kind of inspiration that these are the kinds of things that I'm pretty sure you yourself can instill in your communities. I don't know how many other individuals would be given a task like I have today to come on and share something so personal about how we were literally denied our identity. And, again, how I don't know if any folks on this Zoom have taken part in those kinds of dress up activities that, I'm sure maybe at the time you didn't know how damaging it was, but I do have some other imagery that I will get into to support just how bad these things can get and obviously the impacts that it have on our children. Again, thank you all for being here. And I hope that these are the kinds of things that we can move towards. I'm not here to just talk about the past and talk about our history and heritage. I'm here to make a difference in how we can do and make better choices for our future generations. Having said that, Squanto, I just want to wrap up. He was abducted twice. He was here when the colonists arrived. And I'm sure many of us on this Zoom are probably curious, like what did take place? What can I honestly feel confident in knowing about this celebration that's about to take place with our families? And I also want to impart your homework assignment. Any knowledge or information you're hearing for the first time today, especially if it hits you, in a way that it should, chances are your family and loved ones may not have that knowledge. And I don't think any of you want to let them go to their grave without it. So it's your duty and responsibility for you to hear something today that you never heard before and it makes sense and it's understandable. Try to relate that with your loved ones so that they don't go without that knowledge. Knowledge is power. Having said that, Squanto was there with Samoset the day that so again, the colonists landed on Cape Cod, made a lot of trouble for themselves, digging through our graves as well as our food stores. When we kindly asked them to leave, that was when the Mayflower took sail to Plymouth and landed supposedly at Plymouth Rock. No survivors were there in that community. The only survivor was Squanto himself. He had not met them yet. He was seeking refuge because he had no village, no community whatsoever. We do believe he was way out in Poconoket. Any of you who are familiar with the local area here in New England, the Narragansett Bay, the large body of water now pretty much separating South Coast Massachusetts and Rhode Island. That body of water is what separated the Narragansett Nation from the Wampanoag Nation. So collectively, as I mentioned, all the way from the Cape to what I just explained as present-day Rhode Island was all Wampanoag territory. Many different communities and villages throughout. Plymouth was Patuxet, the place of many falls. The entire village of Patuxet decimated by a disease while Squanto was away on his second abduction. When he found out that the colonists were in Plymouth, his old stomping grounds, I believe it was Massasoit from Poconoket, the furthest Wampanoag community, who sent him out there to greet them. He did greet them in the language, and he was accompanied by Samoset. We don't know exactly why Samoset was here. They've pretty much pinpointed he was from Maine, possibly Penobscot or Passamaquoddy. They just don't know exactly why he was here. They don't even really have a full understanding how he had learned English as extensive as he did. However, we all know now why Squanto could speak so well when he said, "Hello, Englishman." He walked in on a day when there was snow on the ground. He had no shirt on, neither him nor Samoset, and both of them had arrows with a quiver with arrows. The arrow itself, one had a point, the other arrow had no point. And it was just a physical representation in case there was a language barrier. Are you here for war or are you here for peace? For those of you who are familiar with the story, once the colonists agreed to peace, that was when Massasoit came in, attended by just a handful of warriors, as they describe it. No more than several, maybe, warriors came in. And again, this is the day they first met, and they had no idea if they were on peaceful terms or if they were at war with one another. We can fast forward to the spring. Obviously, that was the fall of the first year they had arrived. And then, of course, when they arrive in Plymouth and they're now settling there, Squanto did stick around, tried to help them, adjust and accommodate them, taught them how to get eels from the mud with his toes, how to plant like these with his toes, and also how to plant the fish into the ground before you put the corn. So very helpful. It explains a lot, I'm sure, why they go out of their way to explain how helpful to Squantum was. He was, however, only around for 1 year, maybe even less. Within that year, come fall, he was there when the Thanksgiving feast took place. Squanto, again, being from Plymouth, it was Massasoit who attended that feast. There was no mention of invites. Any of the writings that are written, there's really only 2 written passages that even remotely reflect what we're about to celebrate in a week or so. And that was Edward Winslow and Governor, later to be Governor Bradford. They both wrote that somewhat surprised. They wrote that while they were exercising their arms, many savages, natives, appeared amongst us, among the rest, their greatest king, Massasoit. They actually mentioned there were 90 or so warriors. So any of you who are thinking of the imagery that we've all been given of that first Thanksgiving feast, where you have this big, huge table with the cornucopia and food everywhere, and literally just 1 or 2 kind of almost token natives in there, they obviously, I think, highlight the Squanto and Samoset characters, but 90 warriors is the visual that all of you should get. And I don't know how you can convey that imagery to your family when you're gathered around a table. But just to do some quick math, it was 102 colonists that got on the boat. Half of them died on the way over here. And then another half of those did not make it through that first winter. So dramatically reduced numbers. We easily could have wiped them out that day. A lot of people realize that. Obviously, that is not why we got there. That's not what we showed up for, and it wasn't why we stayed either. When Massasoit showed up with 90 warriors, that's when he found out these people were stuffing their face, thanking their God. I don't mean to offend anyone who is on this Zoom. However, if you are a Christian, you still were not Christian enough for the Puritan Christians that arrived here in the Mayflower and had that religious day of Thanksgiving. We were heathen savages, as I'm sure many of you know. Any Catholics were no less of a heathen savage than I was. Had nothing to do with skin tone. It was all about the beliefs. And like I said, even other Christians couldn't really tolerate a lot of what the Puritan beliefs were at the time and how they were going about it. So a lot of things that prevented what we, I think, envisioned for that first Thanksgiving. It wasn't until the Pequot were the first to be slaughtered. We did not understand European warfare. There was a lot of things that we had never witnessed and just could never even fathom, put our heads around. As I mentioned, there was a lot of opportunities to destroy those colonies when they first arrived. It wasn't until the 1630s that conflicts arose, and this resource here, which is a great segue, I guess. I do want to get into a little bit of show and tell, since I'm showing you streets of Seattle and how well you can show contemporary culture now. I just wanted to highlight our indigenous culture and also some of the resources we have here. I don't know if you can see this beautiful shell. If any of you are from the New England area and you're able to access these resources, these are very, very beautiful and probably the most magical part of New England. And I can only imagine how many people trip over these shells every day down the beach. It's called a quahog specifically, and it's the dark shell clam. I'm sure you can tell why it is called the dark shell clam, that dark, rich purple, captured in ways that this was the only way we recorded these stories. So to make beads that were so small, you could literally wear them in this fashion. These wampum belts were used in many ways to literally illustrate the history of our people. And if you can imagine, maybe even more than one lifetime, not just to make the beads themselves, but to accumulate enough that you could actually tell a story of your people. You would wear your story, you would wear it proudly. This would be our Bible, maybe our Constitution or our Declaration. And just as you see the symbols that are depicted by the Seattle folks here on this manhole cover, clearly they're totem poles, things of that nature. These stories go back thousands and thousands of years. So this is one of the few ways we've had to pass these stories down and preserve them. So having said that, the production of this shell, Pequot, for those of you who may be familiar with Foxwoods, again, I don't know who's on the Zoom and this is a national audience or a regional, but a lot of folks are familiar with Foxwoods Resort Casino here in New England. They have no idea it's a reservation, and they have no idea that that tribe specifically was basically wiped out to the point that they were pretty much told they could never even say the word Pequot again. They can never claim that they're Pequot, speak their language, a lot of specific tactics to literally destroy their entire identity. So it's really miraculous if you do go down to Foxwoods and see all that they've accomplished for themselves, let alone the region. You know, their tax revenue alone, I'm pretty sure, is helping the whole state of Connecticut, if not the region. So, but historically, they were always the strongest because of this shell here. For those of you who are not familiar, the Anishinaabe tribes, Ojibwe tribes, as you may call them, all the way out in the Great Lakes of Minnesota and beyond, every Anishinaabe tribe knows exactly what shell this is and exactly why they would want this resource that far away from the ocean where you would find it. So any of you, again, who can get down to the ocean, don't take this for granted. Any of you who may have family and friends in New England, and you got to tell them this is like the snowflake of New England. It just doesn't melt, but it is very individual. They're just like snowflakes. There's no two that are alike. So go home, make a soap dish out of it, put your earrings in it, whatever you got to do. But it is a part of our culture that captures these stories. And the reason I'm tying in with the Pequot, they were so strong. Their shell was so good. They produced these beads so well, and they were so sought after. Anybody would ally with the Pequot, and therefore they were military strong. Their strength was unmatchable, and that's why they were the first to go. The colonists realized they wanted to attack them, and they couldn't really beat them fair and square. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Pequot Massacre, the Mystic Massacre, they were barricaded into their Mystic Fort in the middle of the night. It was just before dawn broke that they barricaded the one entrance and exit, and they started to burn the people alive that were there. They said over 700 women and children were massacred that day. And if you could just read the writings of these colonists, how proud they were that they could smell their burning, rotting flesh for well over a mile away. John Underhill and John Mason were the captains who led that battle, and they immediately declared this heroic victory where they had to have this country's second religious day of Thanksgiving. So for those of you who are not familiar why Indigenous people have such strong feelings about that particular holiday, and particularly, I guess, how it's taught or celebrated. As I mentioned, the dressing up is problematic, but also any of you who can do anything to help us get into the schools, to help change the curriculum. I don't think any of us want to grow up on a lot of the lies. I think some of us might be thinking, hopefully right now, wow, this is nothing like what I was taught in school. And again, your children are going through this, your own people, your family, your loved ones. I don't think anybody wants to be lied to. I can only imagine. I've seen people, the older they are, like the more shocking it is to have this information given to you so late in life. So never too early to introduce these concepts. So that was literally the second time you ever celebrated a Thanksgiving in this country in that way, by the colonists who arrived here. Obviously, our Thanksgivings had been going on thousands of years prior. But Massasoit, ironically enough, even though he showed up with 90 warriors, and if you didn't do the, like figure it out in your head, he showed up because they were shooting guns. I mentioned the line that was written in this brief passage about what we now call Thanksgiving, which was way closer to October than the November date that Abraham Lincoln put on it much later during the Civil War. And it was in October because it was a harvest feast. However, they specifically mentioned they were thanking their God and having a religious day of Thanksgiving. and exercising their arms. It was literally like right after that line, you realize the natives showed up. And exercising arms is not, doing chin-ups and push-ups and stuff. It was literally firing guns and cannons that alerted Massasoit, again, clear all the way in present-day Rhode Island. I doubt he heard the cannon shots himself, but if any of us have ever played the game of telephone, I'm sure that's how it went from village to village, all the way across the nation, all the way to present-day Rhode Island, where the Pokanoket came from with 90 warriors that day. So very different imagery, as I mentioned, but just to know that guy dropped what he was doing, got 90 people together to stand with him, to go help people that a lot of tribes didn't even want here to begin with. Then you get there, you find them stuff in their face, and you ended up sticking around because, you didn't want to be rude just showing up and then, of course, just leaving. You didn't want to run back 90 miles, 40 miles back across the state. And to know that just the next generation, his very son is what many of you may know as King Philip. He was doing his best to honor the peace that his father clearly tried to establish. His father went out of his way to try and honor the dishonorable actions of the Europeans as they arose, and just insisted more and more be done in a European fashion. And it was, I'm sure, just unbearable to the point that a war did break out. For those of you who may be familiar, King Philip's War. And King Philip being the son of Massasoit Metacom, his given name, his native name. He had a heroic stand. Some say he just about won that battle. Nobody wins a war, unfortunately, and it was really tragic what happened to him. However, for those of you who are familiar with the story, he was not just beheaded, but he was cut into pieces and spread all over New England because they wanted to make such an example of anyone who stands against these colonies. It was literally why they went in and did what they did to the Pequots. And now, just probably about 40 years later, it was the son of the very same man that showed up to save them that very first feast in Thanksgiving. So these are the kinds of lessons that you can't just teach about the turkey and pilgrims, and you can't share the others. I understand, again, it's uncomfortable. Any of you who have children, I'm going to let you figure out how and when you might want to introduce things like this, but you can't let them go blindly through school, because I'm pretty sure they're going to be offended and shocked if they get to be our age and find some of this out for the first time. I don't want to just highlight the history, however. I don't know how much time I have left, but I do want to hopefully focus on some of the things that we have been able to do that have helped bring some of this awareness, and also, anything that you can actually attend. So I'm going to change this here. Can you guys see that? I don't know if we can get a verbal or thumbs up. So
No, we might have to give him
I'm assuming you can see.
permissions. Oh, wait, so we can see it now, actually. Perfect.
So very festive picture. Hopefully shift the focus. This is our annual powwow. So for those of you who are not familiar, obviously 4th of July weekend every year, right in Mashpee. Great opportunity to come down. If you can't see the energy and the vibes in this picture, I don't know what picture will sum it up, but we can't take pictures of Fireball. Fireball is a very intricate ceremony that you can only witness when you're at our powwow. Not every powwow has a Fireball. Not every powwow has a clam bake. So you can see the dancing that's in the background. As you can see, I am not just trying to look like a screaming fool. I am the announcer. I am the MC. I usually try to hype up the crowd and inform them, as I'm doing now. However, I also try to invite you in and make you feel welcome to take part. So any of the dances where you hear me screaming intertribal, which is probably what I'm screaming in this very photo, I'm literally telling you it's time for you to get out of the audience position and get into that dance arena. Many of you who are invited to a powwow, if you ever hear of an intertribal or a round dance, it's your opportunity to participate in our culture. There are very few opportunities for the outsiders to participate. For example, I've dated a Navajo. Her father does yebiche dances. She herself cannot even attend her father's yebiche dances because he is from a different clan than her. Being that she's born for her mom's clan. So those are the kinds of things that, again, try not to be offended if you are not allowed to take part. Please try not to be offended when you're asked not to take photographs of certain parts of these that are very specific. As I mentioned to you, even though I do have a lot in this photo, Fireball is one of the things that we did not allow do not allow at Mashpee Powwow. And again, if you can get down there, you'll be able to see that all for yourself. So having said that, I also want to get into some of these activities that we've created. So I don't know how many of you, and if we can get a verbal, is anyone on this Zoom ever been given the challenge of land acknowledgement? Anyone?
No.
So land acknowledgements come in many forms. For those of you who are familiar, I do consider the manhole cover I just showed you an excellent resource. It's a great way to show obviously historic culture connection, however, in a very contemporary setting and contemporary way. I've been given that task to come up with language for these land acknowledgements. And having traveled to places like Alaska, again, Seattle was very inspiring. Love the Southwest. They always prominently show the culture of that region. I don't know if any of you, again, are from New England, and if you're familiar with this particular style of home and dwelling. A lot of people are familiar with turquoise, which the wampum that I was showing you earlier, that would be our turquoise for this region. A lot of people don't realize that it's here, let alone how integral it is to our culture and heritage and passing all these stories on forever. The weed two is what you're looking at, and this one is not covered. Some of them are covered. This is a more of a seasonal house for those of you who are not familiar. This is what the pilgrims would have arrived and seen right on the coastline of Cape Cod. They would have seen it literally exactly as it's depicted here. No roof would be on it whatsoever during the winter months when they arrived. It's really just cattail covering that would be tied on very easily to cover that house for the summer. So those summer homes were all throughout Cape Cod and New England. However, obviously, I don't know. There's chances are a good number of you folks who are on this Zoom who've probably never seen this, unless you're really fortunate to get to a museum like, maybe plantation or something like that. So we have been taking part in what I like to call the Wampanoag experience. It's not always easy, as I mentioned, to be able to invite people into our spaces and work with them in the manners that we have. However, I've been very, very pleased to see what we've been able to accomplish with some communities who reach out. So I don't know how many of you have opportunities that may arrive to give, let's say, our tribe, maybe myself, an opportunity to come into your community, work with your municipality. Obviously, Indigenous Peoples Day is a great start. If you guys just want to start trying to get some of those initiatives passed inside of your communities, it opens the door for these other things. It was the town of Westport that funded Dartmouth. Dartmouth is right next door to Westport. Any of you who are familiar with the New Bedford area, we're talking South Coast, Massachusetts. So having been through a similar workshop with them, trying to find the right imagery to really inspire you guys. It's something that I've never seen. A lot of times people criticize us and jump to conclusions because they've never been exposed to even witness, let alone participate in like preservation of our culture. So I'm going to see if I can get both of these here. So I'm not sure how to swipe, but not sure if you guys can see Highland House Museum right in the background there. That's out on the Cape. Don't know how many of you might travel out there. Again, I'm not sure if I'm talking to a national audience or not, but this was just this past spring. Spring is the only time of year you can do what this young man is doing. This man has no experience doing what he's doing. That's his father down on the right, if you look closely, holding the pole. So this is two generations who have never done this activity of peeling the cedar bark from the pole. Once they peel the bark, you have to process it. So as you can see here, this is a teacher. These are all students that came from a school that was right down the end of the street. We were very lucky we could tap into that local resource and involve the students. So they're now out of their classroom doing experiential learning. I guess you can call it science-based, or it's definitely relevant to the history and the land. And if you can't see the joy on all of their faces, just being able to be part of it, A lot of them really spoke that, you know, they've never had such an opportunity. And if any of you can think of, you know, not just yourselves, but your children experiencing this. Once we did these ties, once we processed all that bark, in case you can't see, like the first picture was them taking the bark off of the pole. If you look really closely at the wound up strips, there's an outer bark that the woman in the background, you can't quite see her, but she's peeling and processing the bark. Once you remove the bark itself, you have to take the outer bark from that nice flexible inner bark strip. Once you get that done, that is when you're able to place ties that I encourage families to come back as a family with their entire family and place a tie on the structure itself. So having non-native people not only just helping me with this entire process, I can't obviously get them to go inside the actual woods and harvest the bark with me or harvest the trees even. However, once we get the frame up, I usually invite people like yourself, if you can imagine being there with multiple generations, placing ties onto the frame, the symbolism of the symbolism of the connection. Obviously, you can see the uprights and the horizontal poles are coming together, but you also have obviously multiple generations coming together. You have cultures coming together, you know, native and non-native, hosts and guests, you name it. The symbolism of this tie, this just one tie, if I can make any of this possible for any of us, for the land of these communities where we are able to do these things, for the individuals like yourselves who may be able to take part in these things that you can actively, I'm sure, walk better every day knowing I actively took time out of my day to help preserve a culture that was pretty much almost completely wiped out. So again, really, really powerful stuff that we've been doing. I do have just one more photo that I'm going to share to inspire this level of activity, community involvement, if you will. And that would be the machine burn. So for those of you who are not familiar, we don't just build canoes when we've been asked to do so. We've also been very fortunate to dugout canoes. If you're not familiar, they literally can last hundreds of years. They've been found numerous places, and they are a great opportunity again to highlight a lot of the culture, a lot of the material culture. Trying to find some of the absolute best photos we got here. We had a lot of crowd participation. It was really lovely to see all that came about. So the Weetu that we did was literally one day. It only took us one day to finish the frame of that Weetu, and that was because we had people like yourself who were willing to do it. Town of Westport, again, right next to where we built that first Weetu. And I do want to reiterate, the town of Westport funded a Weetu that was actually built in Dartmouth. We were contacted by that same founding organization. Can you apply for more money? I don't know if you folks do that kind of stuff, but if you ever wanted to offer up a grant, this is the kind of work that I would want to put that money towards, bringing our communities together. You can see a lot of people there in the background. Every day at 1 o'clock, I was feeding the public. It was always a highlight of the event. We had a lot of attendance every day at 1 o'clock during that time where we were feeding the public, cooked right on the fire, as you saw, right over the canoe itself. There was a lot of people who were bringing food. This is a gentleman who I had bought a lot of lobsters. I have a relationship with a local seafood distributor who gave me a great amount of lobster to begin with. But this gentleman came in with 20 pounds of lobster, and that's my son donating his own prize striped bass, which we wrapped in clay and baked that right in the coals of the fire. It was really quite the thing to see if you guys have never seen a whole fish like that, baked in clay, stuffed too. We stuffed it with cornbread that somebody else had dropped off, cranberries, all sorts of good stuff. But needless to say, these folks stuck around. I encouraged that gentleman who dropped that lobster off, don't you be going nowhere, get yourself a tent. You actually got to sleep overnight at these kinds of events. And it really helps if you can think of where you've ever been around a fire and the kind of conversations and mood and energy you've found. That's what we create at these events. And then, of course, your conversations change. You know, it's just a little different energy during the day when all the public's there, especially. And anyone who came back during the night really felt a very communal aspect of it that I'm not going to say it wasn't there during the day, but it was just stronger at night. So we did finish the vessel. This vessel will now be sunk every year in the Westport River. We did contact the Westport High School students who came to pay a visit during the burn itself so they could see the process. And each year, hopefully their high school seniors will put the rocks in the fall to sink it and take the rocks out to allow it to float again every spring. We do want this to be accessible to the community and stay within the community for hopefully hundreds and hundreds of years. So these are the kinds of land acknowledgements that have been given I've come up with. A lot of us do get asked to put writing in paper. I often tell people, you know, it's really difficult to feel honored when you're using a foreign English language, most likely spelled in a foreign Roman alphabet, and usually put on a square piece of paper. The only hope I can really advise for anyone who gets stuck in that situation, please at least make the signage round or oval. That would at least speak to our culture better. Because again, written words in a foreign language, I don't know how to feel represented there whatsoever, regardless of what's being shared. However, I consider these kinds of activities actual good land acknowledgements. So don't know. I can probably hopefully just free up my screen here. And I would really love to get into, I don't know how much time we have left remaining, but I'm hoping that I've shared some ideas and insights and inspiration. I'm really hoping there's somebody on this Zoom who would like to make the differences that I've mentioned, especially if they've already realized I don't have a lot of what this man's pointing out to me that we could and should be doing. And the reason why I'm also having this manhole cover for me to drive or fly all the way across the continent to places like Seattle, Alaska, Arizona, and I'm pretty sure any of us who've ever been to Hawaii know that you get the lay of flowers right around your neck as soon as you get off the plane. You see the hula, the luau's are all advertised throughout your stay. Some of us will live in New England our whole lives without any exposure to the culture that I've shared with you today. And I think it's our duty to try and share it with others. So really hoping we do have a couple minutes that maybe we can just talk about how we can work together better as allies. And I don't know, maybe even just what you gained from today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so inspiring. I've taken so much from this, and I want to open it up for a lot of questions, but I do want to say, as you were sharing about the land acknowledgements, that that's such an eye-opening way, at least for me, to look at how we can do this work that I know as a organization we want to do. So we are all from one organization, Nanatucket Resource Associates, and we are located primarily across Massachusetts and with a few others across in New England. So we are all in New England, primarily in Massachusetts, all the way from the Berkshires to Cape Cod. So I'm sure this resonated really deeply with everybody that was on the Zoom today. And I would love to stay in touch about how our organization could get involved in some of these land acknowledgements across the state where we work. So I would love to continue that conversation with you. And I'm sure other people here would also second that.
I believe Rhonda has my info, because I think that would be one way we could definitely, that's obviously quite a lengthy conversation. How do we get it started, where, things like that. But happy to have that conversation, I believe, off camera or something.
That would be great.
Unless you want to, engage it now, see if we can get it going. But if there's a great opportunity that we could do that, I'll be happy to, set aside the time, meet whoever.
I think that would be great. Yeah, we can take this offline, and because I'd love to open it up for more questions. But thank you so much for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
And also, it's a true honor to work for a company, Nanatucket, who acknowledge the Indigenous People Day instead of Chris Columbus Day. And we did that, I think, before it was even popular. So it was just an honor to work for a company to know that they acknowledge our people and call it Indigenous Day.
I don't even work there, and I'm proud of you guys. So thank you.
Hello, Annawon, Weeden, and everyone. This is Sulfi Boardman. I just would like to say thank you so much that I feel so honored that I hear all this information. Well, I came to the state is like not like, not that current, but I'm not familiar with much of the information that you share with me, with us all here, even though I do like to read history, but each time I hear something like this is brings so much sorrow in my heart personally. But I do hope, well, it is an honor first for me to hear all this. So I hope that we all can learn from the past, from the history, all the suffering, the sorrow. War is always bring that devastation and suffering to everybody. And I agree with you that we should have this braveness, especially from your part, from the culture, to share the truth, even though the information is out there, but to be able to hear directly from the people that witnesses from I'm sure that you hear that from your beloved family, from other tribes, and everything else that mold you to be like this is so brave and sharing the truth to others that don't know. So yeah, so basically I just would like to say thank you so much, and hopefully we still be proud of us all as a to hold our virtue as a human being, learn from the past, and really learn and try to bring peace, understanding, and change, even though just start simple. So I do, in my part, I will share more to my daughters, family, and friends as well. So I thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope it's not too sad. Hopefully I try to be the happy ending for my ancestors, at least. As you know, some of them aren't here to, have their own victory dance, but I think that we can, because I don't know who's on this Zoom, but I want to say we're representing both sides of the ocean. So I think that we can come together, and it sounds like a lot of you want to. So if I could be instrumental and make any of that happen, connecting you with communities like I have, I'm really happy to hear that you guys made the Indigenous Peoples Day shift prior to, I want to say, like, I don't know how many of you, but like George Floyd's murder, I want to say it was kind of like a pivotal moment for the country that I see a lot of people doing things now. But I was very proud to say the city of Salem reached out to me well before all of that, before the pandemic. They were trying to work on land acknowledgements and things like that. So really glad to hear that you guys have made those decisions, and I'm sure we can definitely do more. I don't know how I can be more integral in nanotech and all the stuff that you guys do, but happy to help. Thanks for having me out here today. Thank you all for being here and listening.
Also, I think it's important because we do have a different indigenous throughout this Turtle Island, and to have Annawon, Weeden, Mashpee Wampanoag right here represent, and it's so of a true honor, because he comes from a strong, powerful family. His mother, his father, he was raised to be this way, and you don't see that. You don't see that in a lot of cultures and a lot of people, but to have Mr. Annawon Weeden and his wonderful family, I'm so proud, and I thank you.
Making me proud. I'm sure my parents are. I try to make them proud.
Does anybody have any more questions before we end the program?
Yeah, this to be continued. This is the beginning, I think, of a much larger conversation for us to be having. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, guys. If the mascot issue comes up, if you haven't been aware of it, if the Indigenous Peoples Day issue comes up, I've been asked by a lot of towns, municipalities, areas, I guess, that I don't live in, if I can come in and assist them. So whether it's behind the scenes or showing up in person, I'm happy to do it. So just keep me in mind. Rhonda, I'm sure, can help you get in touch with my information should anything ever occur that any of you feel you may not be able to handle directly yourselves. I'm pretty sure Rhonda and I would love to be that resource. So thank you, Rhonda, for getting all of this set up today. See everybody thanking me in person in the chats here. I hope everybody walks away with something today. And if so, all I ask is please share it with your loved ones.
Thank you, Annawon.
Katapatandamu, what you want me to talk about? Thank you, all my relations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Have a great day.